It is 11:06 a.m. I think it's a good time to begin the presentation. Thank you everybody for joining us here today. For those that don't know me, my name is Dean Lorenzo. I'm a student at Red River College Polytechnic, located here in Winnipeg. And today the presentation will be Redefining Resilience. We're joined by Marc Naddell and George Mui. Let me start off by introducing Marc here. 1 second here. Okay, Marc has a dynamic career spanning continents and industries, and roles have provided Marc Naddell with executive success leading geographically diverse organizations in Asian, European, and US-based companies. Referred to as a technology frontiersman, Marc has innovated and marketed solutions using emerging technologies such as AI, Internet of Things, LBS, wireless, and software platforms to create devices, networks, services, and ecosystems. Along his unique journey, he lived and worked around the world and conducted business in over 40 countries and Fortune 50 and startup companies speaking English, German, French, and Mandarin. And if you ask him, he knows a little bit of Cantonese too, but maybe not the friendly words. Marc's education includes a master's in management from the University of Chicago, Booth School of Business, along with communications coursework from Stanford, and professional training on media relations, cross-cultural communications, and effective presentations. As a corporate spokesperson, his efforts resulted in awards and recognition for the offerings of various companies that he represented to analysts and journalists, including Top Global 100 Startup by Electronics Engineering Times, New Product Innovation Award for AI Chips by Frost & Sullivan, and Silicon Top 60 Startup by EE Times, and Best Developer Program Award by Evans Data Corporation. From his earliest days, Marc was drawn to creating and inventing, even being designated as a master innovator for his 20 patent awards by the executive management team of Motorola for his talents in envisioning compelling solutions and describing the technologies and methods for making them realities. He applied his creativity into branding, business models, ecosystem creation, and reinventing himself for the different chapters in his career. He's recently founded and runs new companies based in Silicon Valley, one being ROCS Global, the Results-Oriented Consulting Services Incorporated. This company works with organizations focused on market expansion, as well Mind T Coach, a platform which accelerates growth and accelerates for professionals and leaders by providing driven individuals with their own board of directors for their careers. Marc, thank you very much for joining us today, and please take the floor.
Thank you. And are you going to be driving the slides today?
I will. No, I am not.
Shall I?
That's under the impression you're taking them.
Okay, I can do that. Give me 1 second.
Quite happy.
I apologize. That was the arrangement with the previous class.
In the last
share my screen,
please.
Okay, can everybody see my slides now?
Looks perfect.
Okay, wonderful. So I had originally prepared this presentation for the Inspire conference, and because of technical difficulties, we decided to run this spin-off event so I could have enough time to present what it means to redefine resilient and be resilient, share my insights, give a few examples, and then have a Q&A with my partner, George Moy, which will have a Q&A at the end of this session, at the end of this presentation. So redefining resilience and using the Inspire conference matrix of topics, I wanted to also identify what I had to leverage in becoming resilient in my own journey, such as being innovative and using my talents as a visionary and being one step ahead of the threat, which is partly linked to being visionary, if you can use your imagination and see what's coming, and then solving people's problems. One way to work your way out of a corner is, of course, to provide value to others that will come in and help you and build bridges and help either fix your solution or provide a path forward. I've always been defined by people who know me best as a square peg trying to get into a round hole. And it's basically the story of my life. It's not something I aspire to or I have to work hard at. I don't have to work hard at it at all. It's just my nature, I guess, to be blessed as slightly different. And, you know, one of the expressions I always used is I would never work retail. And that's because I had to work retail once during college. I had to work full time for the past few years of my college life, get my undergrad. And one of the roles I tried was working retail in an electronics store. And it was like the worst use of my talents. I'm a creative person. I don't like lots of rules. When I cook a meal, I don't use a recipe, and that's like the opposite of success in retail. The second thing is, as Dean mentioned, I'm a technology frontiersman. I love working on a technology when it's emerging, when it's new, when it's a clean canvas, waiting for an artist to apply paint and give it structure. And as soon as a technology starts to mature, it starts looking like a recipe book. And that's not where my talents are best applied. And since I'm used to working on the technology frontier, I'm used to starting out with few resources and having to sometimes source resources in the frontier, working with partners, or finding better tools than the traditional tools to solve problems. So I've always been a hands dirty type of leader. Maybe a player coach is the way another person would describe that. And it's one of the factors that contributed to my resilience, is being able to empathize with the people who are working with me on my team, or my colleagues I'm working with, or even my partners. It allowed me to connect, which was a great asset in building a strong, resilient network that could then be leveraged in times where your opportunity was surfacing new challenges, or when you were encountering setbacks in funding or support. As Dean also read from my bio, I reached corporate executive level with companies headquartered in Asia, Europe, and the United States. And I use that experience as a coach. I'm more of a mentoring style of coach. And I coach people on assertiveness, which is definitely what you need to be resilient. Stick to your guns. Also in communications, because when you're in trouble and you need to persuade people to open, to give you funding, or to give you support, or to throw you a line to get out of there, you're going to need those communication skills. And for the past decade, I've been an entrepreneur working in startups and starting startups like Rocks Global, a company that is now run by one of my partners from my time there, and my new platform, which is Mighty.coach. It's a coaching platform. I call it Spotify plus Airbnb for coaching. You can personalize it. You've got a marketplace of coaches and talent, and it's focused around getting people to be more professional, achieve their goals, and ascend the ladder if that's their target. My superpowers, everybody needs to know what their superpowers are. My superpowers are very high levels of creativity and grit. I have tremendous amounts of grit. And the more grit you have, that's a multiplier. If you're a gritty person, if you're determined and you'll dig in for something worthwhile, that will multiply all your other talents. So if you're gritty, congratulations. Now I have just a ton of examples, not only my own examples, but the examples of people I've coached, people I've mentored, people I've worked for. So I have way too many examples for a 40-minute slot. In some cases, I feel like a mosquito in a nudist colony. Just too many things I could be targeting here. So I'm just going to stick on a few key examples during this presentation, and I'll refer to them frequently throughout the slide deck. Now, what is resilience? Resilience is the ability to be happy and successful again after something difficult or bad has happened. And it isn't always a setback. It can also be that you have this exciting opportunity in front of you and you jump on it. It may be the opportunity of a lifetime. And as you engage with it, you're finding that the ambition level you need is far higher than you anticipated. And that happened to me with when I joined Nokia. Motorola was in trouble back in the early 2000s, and I was running the ecosystem program. Back then it was called developer program. It's what a phone company will offer to software developers to write apps for their devices. Now, nowadays, in the age of iPhone, the App Store and the Google Play market, everyone just takes it for granted. That's just been there forever. But it wasn't. Back in 2000 and shortly thereafter, management teams in tech had still not bought into the concept of using third parties to fulfill their consumer and customer desires. And that's the area, that's the tech frontier I was working on, is creating a program to attract software developers in to write apps for Motorola phones, right? And as Motorola was encountering tough times and setbacks and losing market share, I reached out to my network. I wanted to find a different company, one with vision that would see what I was working on and would respond. And Nokia was the big leader back then, 50% market share. They were creating software platforms. And so I reached out to a friend who knew somebody over at Nokia, used my network, and they were ecstatic to talk to me because in my short time in that role at Motorola, just a couple years, I had created a boutique program that was attracting branded content in, all these branded titles from Bandai and Atari and all these kinds of, arcade games were now flooding into Motorola. And also I was key in forging a relationship with MTV, around content for their channel. And so Nokia flew me over and I had interviews with them. And it's funny because during the bank of interviews I had, one VP said, "Why should we hire you to be an expat in Finland? You will cost us the same as hiring 5 local people. Why should we consider such an expense?" And I said, "Well, I think you know that answer, because if you could hire 5 people instead of me, why would you fly me over here for a week of interviews?" And that's all I had to say, right? But that's knowing yourself and knowing your situation, and without being a smart aleck, just saying it very calmly. "Well, I think you already know, right? Why are you talking to me, right?" So I got that opportunity, and here's the gotcha. When I say sometimes a challenge will unfold after you get an exciting opportunity, is my first day on the job, I said, "Okay, I'm here to launch the program, and what's the requirements and everything." And so, "Oh, we have no clue. We don't know." I said, "You don't know?" So it was a little odd because you spent all that money to hire me, bring me over, right? And you don't have any plan. You don't have a clue, right? But what about research? No, we haven't done any research. But you have 80 days to launch this program. You have to research it, define it, get approval, and launch it in 80 days because we have a 90-day probation. We have a 90-day probation for new employees. So that's where all kinds of stress. So if I wasn't resilient, if I wasn't determined, if I wasn't confident, I may have folded and started interviewing or backed out of that opportunity. But I doubled down. I doubled down and I worked my butt off. I was their first person in the office, leaving way after everyone else had left, working through weekends. I started the job on December 3rd, 2003. And my daughter was due in January back in the U.S. So, I had a lot to fight for, and I was going to make it happen, and I did everything. So On this chart, it says live or die. That was a live or die. If I didn't launch that program and if it didn't excite people, after I launched it, I was just going to be gone. And they would save all that expense of having me relocate and make, the money. So I learned how to design websites because they hired an outside contractor who said, what do you need? Right? I created business models that would attract and retain and excite and activate software developers for Nokia. I worked with the tech support team to figure out what hooks from their tools needed to be on the website. And I created the whole thing. I got funding. There wasn't a budget for it. I had to go, convince management we're going to have to spend this money, create this website that had all this workflow. I had to write all the web content, tons of pages. I had to design every workflow and get the approval of all those teams. But I made it happen. That's grit, right? The creativity, the vision, what would be perfect for Nokia, sell them, get them excited, get the budget, and make it happen. So that's one example of how a challenge can all of a sudden present opportunities to be resilient and discover yourself. The second example is setbacks. This is after you've got something going and you're really enjoying it. You've already accomplished things, and then all of a sudden stuff happens. So my dream job came after Nokia. In fact, my dream job came because of my success with Nokia. One of Nokia's partners was called Navtech, and they were the leading map technology company back in the mid 2000s, right around 2006, 2010. That was the map you should be using if you were selling a solution that included a map, right? And so the setback came. Let me build this up first. Is Navtech was one of our partners at Nokia, and they just loved this ecosystem they were experiencing. They were finding customers, they were launching solutions, they were getting visibility. So they asked around and said, who's the guy responsible for this program that we're experiencing from Nokia Pro? And they all pointed to me. So the senior VP at Navtech at one of our events approached me and said, would you ever be interested to return to Chicago and work for us? Are you looking for an opportunity? It'd be a vice president role. And that was my first opportunity to become an executive. And I was like, this would be a greenfield, complete greenfield. And Navtech was this company, just a high margin, dominant, the big player in the map industry. So I was all over it. And the boss, the guy who was approaching me would be my boss. He was a visionary person. And he worked for one of the greatest CEOs I've ever met, the ex-Disney, alumni of the year, University of Chicago Business School, just a brilliant, brilliant guy. And they both loved me. They both supported me. And I came in and built a huge team and, built out all kinds of processes. We engaged with partners. And then my boss left the company. And then we had what we call a yay boo. Yay, we got acquired, and boo, things were going to change, right? We got acquired for $8.2 billion, which was great for everyone who had options. I had some. And then the acquirer was Nokia. And they had a very different vision for how maps were going to be used. And the situation changed dramatically because the person who is now my supervisor was not a big fan of developers. He was in charge of sales. And for him, those developers were a distraction away from the big customers like BMW and Mercedes and Chrysler and Toyota, right? So he saw my requests for funding or the fact that I had, 40 to 50 people on my team as kind of a drain on resources. And it wasn't helpful that Nokia didn't like us selling to other device makers. So there were all these pressures coming at us. So we had to get very creative to show new value. So our strategic role in the company had evaporated quite quickly, and we were put on a quota for revenue generation. So we had to stimulate new avenues where we can contribute value. So we engaged with companies like Intel and Amazon and brought our salespeople in to pitch that we could get developers for their platforms and their websites and their cars. We were finding apps for BMW. We were finding apps like car locating apps, right? And fuel efficiency, green driving apps for Mercedes and Audi. So all of a sudden we were creating a new value to preserve what we had. But that's just another example of how you can be resilient and not give up and not just fold and not just leave, right? So we were able to exist another 3-4 years, still delivering value, still enjoying our work, and still learning and growing. A lot of the people in our team got to rotate jobs, got to learn new skills, got their promotions, and it was good work, high paying. Okay, so the first thing I would say for anyone who wants to be resilient is know yourself. So there's 3 areas that you should really know yourself. One is your level of commitment, right? So what's your level of determination in your career? Some people have more of a focus on work-life balance, or, maybe career isn't as important to them. It's a different story. How much energy will you apply to your work? And what's driving you? The second thing is your abilities. What are your skills? What are the experiences you can leverage in your career? And experiences is really where your network comes from. The roles you've had, the people you've met, is your bridge into networking. That's your exposure. And then the third thing is your nature. What are your innate talents? What are the activities you enjoy doing? What are your interests and how do those overlap? And what's your personality? Are you an extrovert? Are you an introvert? Are you a planner? Are you an opportunist? So I recommend this link here, and I hope everyone's going to get this presentation or access to it after this event, because you can find a number of great assessment tools there. My favorite is 16 Personalities. I do a lot of coaching on that actually in my practice at Mighty. But you may find others there that are more specific to where you have questions. Second is collect the tools for your own personal resilience toolbox. So there are many recommendations for tools, but these are mine as it regards to resilience. First is emotion management. See, now this is the thing I had to learn from scratch. When I entered the workforce, I'm naturally an introvert. I like to sit and work on things by myself. I love to learn. I love to create. I hate interruptions, and I don't like people messing up my beautiful designs, right? But I had to learn, if I wanted to reach executive levels or even just management levels, I had to control my emotions, because my beautiful plans, when I present them, people will have questions, they don't understand them, or they have suggestions how to make them better or different or add some additional capability. So I had to learn, first of all, that was all positive, that they're just trying to help, that in many cases their feedback is useful, not just because some of those ideas will make my design better, but also it's letting me learn what's not going to work when it goes beyond my direct control. When I try to launch it, some people are going to see this thing and they're going to have the same reaction as these people giving me this immediate feedback, right? So emotion management is critical. I would say that's the first thing you got to do. So you don't overreact, you don't panic, you don't scare away your allies, and you don't scare away your own team. Emotion management. Second, can do, can learn attitude. Oh, let me go back to emotion management. Remember I said there was a boss who inherited my team at Navtech, right? And we had no chemistry at all, and he was extremely harsh. And regardless of what he ever said or done or threatened, I never overreacted, I never complained. He once looked me in the eye one-on-one and said, if you ever go behind my back, you're done. Which meant if you ever go talk to that CEO again who loved me, he was going to axe me, right? Because CEO was hearing great things about what we're working on, and he didn't like it. But I still found ways to get in front of the CEO because the CEO liked to have little gatherings. And that would be my window to go in and tell him about something fantastic we're working on that my boss would never share with the CEO. See, but I would not overreact one-on-one, right? And when budgets got cut, don't panic, don't complain, just find new ways to get other teams to give you funding for what you're trying to do, or work with a partner, have them sponsor an activity. So emotion management, so critical. Second, can do, can learn attitude. Remember when I was in Finland, right? And they unleashed, you got to go get the requirements. You got to define the project. You got to sell it to the management, get your funding, launch it within 80 days. I was like, okay, I really want this to happen. It's right in my wheelhouse. It's going to take creativity and grit. I'm 100% about that. I'm not afraid. I can do it. I will do any part other people won't do. I will just look for other people to do the rest of it, right? I will try to persuade people it's in their benefit this program happens. Get them to contribute. Get them to speak up for more budget, more funding for their parts, right? Positive outlook, positive energy. In the worst of times, a leader needs to sell hope. You need to be the source of optimism. If there's a 1% chance you guys can do it, let's all get together and focus now. Let's figure out how we're going to make that 1% become a reality, right? Hopefully you're not in a 1% success position. I don't think I've ever been in one. But if you want to keep your team, keep them focused and have a chance, you have to sell hope. You have to be a source of hope and inspiration. And fourth is your brand. A lot of people in the workforce don't understand what that means. Brand isn't something you advertise. That it doesn't create your brand. Advertising does not create your brand, right? The person who buys a Mercedes gets activated by the ad to buy a Mercedes. But the first time they got impressed with Mercedes is the first time they sat in one, right? They sat in it and they're like, this is not like my old, AMC Pacer at all. This is really a great experience here in this leather back seat. So the ads then come in and remind that person what that experience was and shape it, right? Talk about the premium leather, the smooth ride, the no sound coming in from the outside, the smooth acceleration, whatever, right? It doesn't have to be a Mercedes. It could be, a Cadillac. But as it regards to your career, your brand is what other people experience when they interact with you, right? How polished you are, how collaborative, how convincing, how articulate, how knowledgeable. Whatever those elements of your brand are going to be remembered is what they get from you. If you just sit like a limp dish rag in a meeting, they may not even remember they met you, right? So just remember, brand, it originates from you. It's every touch point people have, whether it's an email, whether they're discovering your LinkedIn profile, or they're meeting you face to face at an event or in a meeting. That is your brand. And your brand is critical to affect your networking. You want to have the right brand for the network you need to cultivate. So that's the second thing, is collect the tools for your own personal resilience toolbox. The third thing is create your I. I call the I my bucket list for career. These are all the things personal and career related that were related to what my job was, whatever job I was taking. And I don't want to go into detail on that, but you'll notice the blue ones are career goals achieved. The green ones were personal goals achieved. And the yellow are goals in process. And red is ain't happening. So I still don't think I'm going to retire by 35, basically because I'm not 35 anymore. and I didn't retire. So that's an easy one. But you'll see some of them overlap together, like live in California and work on emerging technologies. Those overlap because it's more likely I will work on emerging technologies if I live in California. So those work together, combined, and were a key focus for me on both levels. Fourth, commit to resilience. We were making jokes about commitment before we started this event, all of us here on the panel. So there are animals that participate in breakfasts across the USA. Chickens and pigs are included, but only the pig is 100% committed to your breakfast. And how can you act with commitment? First, have that mindset. If there's any difficulties, challenges at all, suspend your disbelief. Be willing to accept failure. If you're looking at a chance for failure, examine what are the repercussions of failing. Grapple with it up front. What happens if I lose my job? Well, I'm going to have to find a new job, right? Maybe I have to move. Maybe I have to move back in with my parents. Can I deal with that? Is that an option? Right? So you work through it. And it helps to take some stress off if you deal with it up front instead of leaving it unresolved as you're trying to make these commitments. Then accept success without perfection. Perfection may be something that you really want, you strive for, but don't let perfection be the enemy of success. You aim for perfection and you don't accomplish the minimum viable product. You need to continue the fight. And be flexible. One of my favorite quotes down there is from Tony Robbins. Stay committed to your decision, but stay flexible in your approach. If the budget doesn't come through to finish the project, go find partners, right? Or find some alternative way to implement. And then take actions. Don't sit and continuously collect more alternatives and more options. Give a reasonable amount of time to cultivate a few options. Analyze those as best you can within the time frame, and then take action. Make your commitment. And when you take your commitment, take your action, be the most determined. You or your group, be the most determined players on the battlefield. That will scare off most of your competition. And then you can just focus on competing on who's left. Don't keep it a secret. Just get out there. And cultivate allies. Find people who share an interest in your success. The outcomes will benefit them, and have them come in and collaborate or give you funding or make introductions, whatever they can do. This is getting over to the networking again, and I know George and I are probably going to cover some networking in the Q&A. So I have a 3+1 system, I call it, for resilience. First of all, have the right perspective. This is you could say a cousin to having a growth mind, is just know that stuff happens, right? Just be aware that the world is dynamic, industries are dynamic, companies are dynamic, people change, and how you start, the landscape you start on may not be the landscape you operate on or finish in. So instead of saying, oh, I'm so darn unlucky, or why did this happen to me? Forget that. That's not productive at all. Just say, hey, when you drive in a car, you might get in a wreck. The point is, try to avoid them, try to survive them. And it's the same thing with the perspective of challenges, right? If you're ready for that up front, when a challenge happens, it'll be easier to maintain your emotion, the emotion management. Second thing, be purpose-driven. When you're in a challenge, when you're in a stressful situation, timelines change, funding's gone away, be purpose-driven in where you spend your time, in where you put your efforts, in how you apply the resources. And third, hone your positive energy, reflection, assessment, having a growth mind. If you've ever heard of a famous British explorer, Shackleton, he was leading an expedition to the Antarctic back around the time of World War I, when there was an unusually colder and stormy winter. Then his ship got stuck in ice, eventually got crushed and sank. And he had to take his men and trek across frozen ice covering the Antarctic Ocean to reach land. And it's amazing, over the, I think it was 3 years, these people survived on their own. He didn't lose one single person. And he did it with positive energy, selling the hope, keeping them focused on the being purpose driven, how to go fish, how to get water, how to stay warm, how to make progress continuously getting back to civilization. And the fourth step here, the +1, is more tactical. When you're making your commitments and you're executing, be disciplined. First of all, update your to-do list every morning. Before you get your breakfast, you should go through your to-dos, make sure what you missed yesterday is the first thing you're doing today if it was supposed to be done yesterday. Respond to those urgent emails, update your calendar, send out those invites, nail a few tasks, pay a few bills. You'll feel so much better when you crush a whole bunch of small tasks first. You'll feel energized all the way up to second breakfast or first lunch. And the other thing I like to recommend is, if you have big projects you're working on, book those schedules, those slots in your schedule, 3-4 hour chunks if necessary, just to make sure you get enough time to concentrate and make progress on those really important but maybe not urgent tasks, because those will catch up with you if you're not putting in the focus time on big projects, budgeting, performance reviews, all those things that really need you to focus and sink in. Block out the times in advance. Okay. So that's what I wanted to preload my presentation on. I hope that all of you have gotten at least 1 or 2 useful things out of that. And now I'm going to turn it back to Dean.